I join the Prime Minister in paying tribute to Corporal Damien Lawrence, who was killed in Afghanistan on Sunday. He died serving our country. Could I also take this opportunity to wish the Prime Minister a happy 57th birthday? All right, enough of that. Enough of that. In January last year, the government was sent details of 4,000 dangerous foreign criminals. For an entire year, it did absolutely nothing with that information. Can the Prime Minister explain how such a catastrophic failure to protect the public took place?
Mr. Speaker, the Attorney General has asked the Crown Prosecution Service to conduct an inquiry into this very matter. This was a request by the Dutch authorities for us to look through our DNA records. There were 4,000 names put to us by the Dutch. 11 cases have been discovered as a result of the investigation. The inquiry will cover all details of what happened. But I have to say to him, it was only possible for the Dutch to ask us to look at our DNA records because we are keeping full DNA records. They opposed that legislation.
The Prime Minister tells us there's an inquiry. There always is an inquiry with this government. Frequently a police inquiry. The Prime Minister is somehow pretending that the fact 4,000 details were left on a civil servant's desk for a year was somehow a triumph of government policy. Look, there are some simple questions. He's told us that 11 criminals have committed crimes in Britain this year. Of those, can he tell us what crimes they committed?
The crimes, as I understand it, are assault and non-payment of fines. These are the crimes that have been identified. Of course, the full report will reveal the final details, but I have again to ask him, does he now support DNA being kept by the government? They voted against the 2003 Act. The Dutch would not have asked us for these details had we not had the DNA, but he's been against that measure.
The Prime Minister, as ever, is completely wrong. The first DNA legislation was passed when the Right Honourable Member for Folkestone was Home Secretary in the Home Office, and I was working for him.
That's Michael Howard.
Let us be absolutely clear. If the government had acted on this information, crimes like this could have been prevented. And as he said, some of them were serious assaults, violent assaults. Why is it that this government is so incompetent when it comes to processing information about criminals? It failed to deport the foreign criminals. It failed to process the details of 30,000 British citizens who committed crimes overseas. And now we know that information about serious crimes sat on a desk in Whitehall for a year and nothing was done. Shouldn't people conclude that this incompetent government simply cannot keep them safe?
He is entirely wrong about the deportation of foreign criminals. 2 years ago, only 1,500 were deported. Last year, as a result of the action we have taken, 4,200 were deported. We are now signing agreements with Jamaica, with Nigeria. I've raised the matter with China and Vietnam so we can deport foreign criminals. There were no record kept of deportation of foreign criminals under the Conservatives. We have deported 4,200. And I come back to the central question. We have tightened up the law on DNA. That is the reason why the Dutch authority want the information from us. He opposed that legislation. Does he now change his mind?
Northern Rock. He wants a question on Northern Rock. Well, here is one for him. Last night we learnt that Northern Rock will not be subject to the Freedom of Information Act. I have the legislation here. It says, for the purposes of the Freedom of Information Act, Northern Rock will not be a publicly owned company. What is the Prime Minister trying to hide?
Mr. Speaker, the only reason that the Freedom of Information Act comes into this is it would be unfair on Northern Rock that other companies knew everything about its business plan. It is surely a matter of commercial confidentiality that Northern Rock should be able to plan its business future. And as far as the commercial future of Northern Rock is concerned, we have made it absolutely clear that the new head of Northern Rock, Ron Sandler, will operate in a commercial market. He will be able to decide on repossessions and all these other issues, and he will put forward his plan for the restructuring of the company. It may be helpful, however, if the Conservative Party explained its plan, which is now to run down Northern Rock, to have a fire sale of its assets, to get less than market value for them, the worst possible deal for the taxpayer.
Prime Minister's answer is feeble. Other publicly owned companies like the Post Office, like Scottish Water, the Tote, National Savings, all of them are subject to freedom of information, but not Northern Rock. Let me remind the Prime Minister what he said about freedom of information. Freedom of information, this was in his lecture on liberty, by the way, from the Supreme Leader. Freedom of information is the right course because government belongs to the people, not the politicians. But, he went on, it can be inconvenient, at times frustrating, and indeed embarrassing for governments. Isn't that why he's covering this up?
And perhaps he might publish the reports of the Midlands Industrial Council, a Conservative organisation. Mr. Speaker, everybody in the country will know that in a competitive mortgage market, it would be ridiculous to ask Northern Rock to publish every detail of its business plans. Commercial confidentiality has got to be respected in the running of the company. He should be the first to support it.
The government was happy to show Richard Branson all the facts, but they won't tell the British public. When it comes to Northern Rock, here are some of the things the Prime Minister won't tell us. What is the total liability for the taxpayer? He won't tell us. How much money is the taxpayer going to pay for the business? He won't tell us. How long are we going to hold this business? He can't say. Should the business get bigger or smaller? He won't tell us. And last night, we found out at 10 minutes to midnight that half of the mortgages, the best half, are owned by somebody else. When it comes to this government and freedom of information, they would make Fidel Castro proud. Why are you covering it up?
Mr. Speaker.